Gary Shteyngart, the author of Super Sad True Love Story. Gary, I read an interview in which you said in this new book that you ventured into what you called William Gibson land. How did you get there?
Well, growing up, I read a lot of science fiction. I was a very dedicated subscriber to Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine, which is sort of the holy grail of the nerd. And actually, I was a fairly early adapter in the 80s to technology. I remember getting that Commodore 64 the moment it came out, and really, playing all those games, and then writing my own software. But then I went to a science high school, Stuyvesant High School in New York, and it was way too hard for me. So I kind of gave up on technology for a while and retreated into this very authorial kind of world where I just lived in my own mind and read books and watched movies. So it's always the seeds of that kind of uber dorkness were always there. And when to research this book, I hired an intern, a young man who helped me figure out what the intertube was, and got me an iTelephone and the whole 9 yards. And so it was kind of a homecoming for me, because I'd always, I think all Russian immigrant kids are obsessed with technology because it's such a haven away from the very difficult world outside.
I just read a series of essays by Jonathan Franzen, one of which he took great pleasure in announcing that he'd thrown out his television. And he's clearly not a guy who's very sympathetic to BlackBerries or iPhones or iPods. Do you think one can be a relevant writer these days and live without cutting-edge digital technology?
Well, I think one can definitely throw away one's television, because it's, I own several, but I don't watch them because everything is on my computer now. So, yeah, the TV we can safely dispose of, I think. In fact, the gentleman who installed my television cable said that, that this thing is going to be just a computer monitor pretty soon, and all the channels will be streaming to my laptop. Is it possible to live without this stuff and still understand the world around us? I would say no. I would say it's impossible. And and it's interesting because I teach writing at Columbia University, and I have many wonderful students who write with incredible eloquence. But what often I find is interesting in their stories and novels is that the action, even though it's supposed to be contemporary, is very pre-digital. It's very rare for anyone to be texting someone or using, Foursquare or whatever is out there at the time. It's almost as if the writer senses that these things are, in a way, an existential threat to our livelihood and our future as writers, and you almost want to live in the world before this technology. So I'm surprised that there aren't more books, that I was one of the few sort of quote-unquote literary authors that really ventured into this idea of technology, because I guess in a sense we're all scared of it, but to try to write about the world as it is today and not mention technology is, I think, a disservice to any kind of realism that we may want to portray in our books.
Perhaps the traffic, though, in the future will come the other way. Literature will be reinvented by technologists, people passionate about digital. For members of our audience who might like to write, who are intimate with technology, who are inspired by what you're saying, what advice would you give them about picking up a pen or a keyboard and starting to do fiction?
Well, I think one of the things, first of all, you have to read tons more than you write. America is in a strange position where I think we have more writers now than we actually have readers. It's a kind of supply and demand problem where we're a culture of incredible self-expression, so we'd rather create something ourselves than passively sit by and engage in another person's work. But in order to become a good writer, one has to read even more than one writes. And the second thing, which is also very hard to do, is to find hours, 3-4 hours during the day in which one is not engaged with the world in an electronic way, to turn off all the devices. Of course, except for one, I write on a laptop as well, and just to engage with what is happening in your own mind, to probe your own mind, to probe the things that interest you, to try to understand other people as well as yourself. These are things that cannot be accomplished with any digital device. These are things you have to do yourself.
Do you use Freedom, the technology that cuts off the internet?
No, I haven't. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I do one thing though. I go upstate, and I have the biggest culprit in my life is the iPhone, and luckily AT&T is a company that well simply can't connect a cell phone to the outside world. So when I go up there, it doesn't work. I don't get a signal. People are saying to switch to Verizon, but staying with AT&T is my version of that freedom program, because at least when I leave Manhattan for the countryside, nothing works.
So AT&T is the best provider for writers, right?
It's the best provider for any creative person who doesn't want to constantly be connected.